our entree to the world of culture, gender, sexuality, tradition, business, and so much more. Hi, I'm Regina Gershman.
And I'm Dr. Sam Dubé. Together, we're going to take you on an extraordinary journey with engaging people from around the world, starting from right here in Ottawa, the capital of Canada. Hi, Dr. Sam Dubé here, and it is my pleasure and honor to be interviewing Anni today from New York. Anni has told me she self-identifies as a cisgendered female with fluid sexuality. So Anni, welcome and thank you for agreeing to speak with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
How's the temperature over there? We're almost 40 Celsius right now with Humidex. So if you see me glowing a bit, I apologize.
Well, you look all right. It's pretty hot in New York, but I've turned off the air conditioning so that way it doesn't interfere.
Okay, well, I've got this fan blowing at me, so I'm going to be like the model with the hair blowing at this point. You mentioned to me that you've dated all kinds of individuals. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and seek into some of these experiences?
Well, I grew up in a really liberal state, Massachusetts, been gay forever. The term Boston marriage is derived from Boston, Massachusetts, as two women who live together. And so I grew up in a very liberal area, predominantly white, middle class, and, you know, Massachusetts' biggest export is education. So there were always a lot of college students. So because I, had the time, right, because I'm middle class, because I had the access, because there are so many colleges, I was really able to, explore different types of relationships, and, different kinds of people. My ethnicity is Chinese, and if I was raised traditionally Chinese, I wouldn't have had the freedom to explore different genders and different types of people that weren't just cisgendered male heterosexuals. And so I sort of, went the opposite direction and explored people that weren't cisgendered and weren't heterosexual, just sort of the vast opposite. And I spent about 10 years just really like living the alternative lifestyle. And it wasn't really until recently that I started seeing cisgendered males that are heterosexual exclusively. So it's been interesting because for a lot of people, their structure, if they are female, is that there's the obligatory heterosexuality. And I sort of had the opposite experience where I was just okay to be with whomever and then, got back to it and is still trying to figure out where I am.
Questions for you. You mentioned your relatively liberal upbringing, yet being of Chinese descent. My mother is from China, and I didn't realize the upbringing until I got older, comparing myself and my behavior to my friends, you know what I mean, who were not raised Chinese. So a lot of little cultural things I didn't realize that I still eat with chopsticks every day. That's a very mundane example, but I just thought everybody did, until I was about 12. So that's how that manifested for me, but also in my mother's outlook and philosophy. It was hard to pull her personality from the culture. What is what? You just can't, because you don't think of your mom as Chinese, right? But how did your parents' liberalism manifest during your youth and during your adolescence?
Well, my parents aren't Chinese.
Ah, okay, you were adopted, were you?
Yes.
So you're ethnically Chinese. Okay, that's interesting. All right. What challenges did that afford you growing up, if any? Or advantages?
I mean, if you're a Chinese person, you're the model minority. And there were just so many people who have accused me of going to Columbia College or just being one of the many college students that were always around, which was really flattering, but I really wasn't that academically smart, and I actually work in the arts now. So you can see that I just wasn't a good fit for my college town, and being a model minority Chinese girl being raised by 2 white Jews. But I will say that I have a very large family. I'm the youngest of 6, all none of them are related to me, and so when you're the youngest, you can sort of look up and see like, oh, all my other siblings really didn't do so well in their relationships. And it's okay, everyone has different ways of relating. And because I'm the youngest, and I don't know where I'm going with this, other than to say that, our early childhood relationships really determine how we're going to relate to other people. And maybe that's why I'm so okay being really fluid with where I'm going with my romantic relationships.
That's interesting. You seem to exemplify a very high level of insight, self-insight, and attributing your current tendencies in relationships to your background. And it's a very interesting background at that. And I love how you said, I'm not exactly the model minority. That's cute. Can you talk to us about your very first relationships outside of your family, outside of your immediate family, romantic relationships? Whatever you're comfortable discussing.
I just remember, I was in grade school, right? I was in middle school, where you sort of dilly-dally a little bit with what the hell are you going to do with the rest of your life? And there was this person I was really into, and I had kissed her in the cafeteria. I think I was really brave when I was younger.
How old were you?
More brave than... Huh?
How old were you?
I was 13.
Okay.
And my computer science teacher, he's this really old man, comes by and he's like, "What are you doing, Anni?" And I was like, "I just don't know." And we kind of just brushed it off, meh. But it wasn't anything had really gone wrong, We were just sort of experimenting, and I just happened to get caught. And this would just be a theme throughout the rest of my life, but I didn't know that this was my first kiss. And the next day, I kissed her again, and what happened was the same thing. My computer science teacher was like, "Anna, we just had a conversation about this." And so I learned, it's okay to be gay and to kiss girls, but don't do it in the cafeteria. So it wasn't "Oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're homosexual," right? Shaming. It was it's okay to sort of explore these things, but don't do it in public on school property.
How did that make you feel, that experience from your teacher? His reaction?
I think it was a really polite and very kind and generous experience. It was just this is not the right time or the right place. It was as positive as you could really make out 2 girls kissing when they're 13.
That's the impression I'm getting from you in recalling this. That's the impression I'm feeling from you as you tell this story. So that's a good thing. So
But it's kind of not, because it sort of, you know, continued this positive affirmation of like, yeah, like, it's okay to kiss girls, just not in school. But of course I continued kissing girls in school, right? I would just like time them. I would just tell them like, hey, how about noon in this bathroom? And this was like, you know, from 13 throughout my entire high school career. And it just really didn't end at all, ever. Even when I went to college, which was like totally different. And so like in high school, I had, you know, these teachers, also really gay too, and they just knew that I was gay. And they just like leave the back door open, you know, of the room, and it led off to this like beautiful lawn, and it was
literally,
gorgeous.
like literally left the back.
Yeah, and they'd be like, okay, it's lunchtime, and they'd just be leaving the back open, and like all my classmates would just leave to have lunch. And then like I had a girlfriend, right, because I was older. I was like 16, 17, and we just have like lunch in the backyard. And like the teachers were totally, they knew what was up. They knew that I had like little dalliances and whatever, but it was like okay because it was me, right? Probably because I'm a model minority. I seem really trustworthy. I'm very articulate. I wasn't really that smart, you know, academically speaking, but I think that teachers can really get on board with, especially my gay teachers, can really get on board of being young and really struggling, and they sort of they sort of really like saw themselves in me.
That's what I wanted to mention. So you mentioned it before I did. Okay. So were you mentored in a way by these teachers then? Do you feel that you were encouraged, or you were just given opportunity where maybe they didn't have it?
I think the latter. You know, we're talking about my teachers were about 40, 50, right? 40, 50 years ago, you really can't be gay at all. And, you know, we have like tags on the back of our shirts. And in the 80s, those were called fag tags.
Oh.
So, you know, just the acceptability of gay people in this generation is, you know, as liberal and as accepting as it can be, compared to last generations. So my teachers really just sort of lived vicariously through me. And not only was I like encouraged, but I was given a really long leash, and they really were interested in my love life as well. Like, you know, all my female teachers, my male teachers like didn't really care because they were male and heterosexual.
Vicarious experience, I love it.
But like, yeah, that was my high school and, you know, early young adulthood, and I think it really shaped me for, you know, positive way to perceive myself, not as, you know, villainous and shameful as, you know, so much of what we're told. Do you know any gay Asians? Because
yes, I do.
I don't really know that many.
Yeah, no, you're right. I don't know many at all in comparison with other ethnicities. You're absolutely right. I have to confirm that. Your observation is very astute, and there may be a few reasons for that. Did you ever receive any advice, direct advice from these teachers? And if so, what?
I don't think I received any advice. They were just sort of
Leaving that back door open, literally and figuratively, right?
Yeah, they were just like, this is what I can do for you. Get your schoolwork done. Tell me a little bit about your romance. And that was it. Like, they were really into gossip. My teachers set each other up. You know, it was very different, I guess, had I, lived in the middle of the country.
Mm.
It was just a very liberal town. And I had
So,
very kind teachers.
it sounds like it. It really does sound like it.
And they really trusted me, and I just don't know why,
But you didn't violate that trust. I don't think you have anything to worry about. I think that you lived up to their expectations of you, and that they were happy to help you.
They really were. Like, too happy. Like, there's something wrong with that, don't you think? Because, like, when I compare, like, my other teachers, like, were they helping their students with their heterosexual agendas? Absolutely not. You know? So, like, my gay teachers were definitely helping me with my gay agenda. And it was really kind and generous of them. And also, like, a little concerning, like, what were they thinking? Why did they let me?
To the model minority phenomenon.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
that is
true.
very interesting.
I do seem really trustworthy.
Yeah, no, and I mean, as a fellow Asian, there is that. There really is that. And unless you've experienced it, it's difficult to convey. It really is. And so I agree with you on this completely. And I'm not going to delve further into that right now because I want to move on. But that's a really interesting thing. And it sounds to me, well, okay, suppose you're in that situation now where you see a young woman or a young man and you want to be encouraging. Would you behave in a similar fashion?
Yeah, I'd leave, like, the keys, and I'd be like, okay, have fun, be safe. That's it.
Because of the positive influence it had on you.
Yeah, it's like the honor system. It's like, I see you, you're a baby gay. I was once a baby gay. We gotta all rise together.
That's so cute. But it's interesting that this intersection between the racial perception and the assumptions with that in facilitating your exploration of your gayness. There's that intersection between the sexuality and race that is manifesting here in this recollection. It's
especially since I wasn't, like, particularly good academically. Like, I just don't know where they got these crazy.
You got a pass. You got a pass from your Asianness.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Okay, so moving along the years now, can you talk about your next relationship, or memorable relationship? Can you talk to that?
Well, I had a long-term relationship with a transgender individual for about 1.5 years. I was in college. And he opened the door to go to the cafeteria, the on-campus cafeteria. And I saw his sweatshirt, and I was like, oh, I like Martha's Vineyard too. And, when there's a lot of different layers to being gay, but one of the layers is that there is this really long eye contact. It's about 4 seconds. You see a gay person, they see you, you maintain eye contact for 4 seconds, checking each other out, gauging, like, are you gay? Are you not gay? I don't know. Look at the fingernails, and then you just give a little head nod if it's just an acknowledgement. But if you want more than acknowledgement, then you better, like, make some shit up. So I made some shit up, and I was like, I like your sweatshirt. And he was like, yeah, like, love Martha's Vineyard, because he was wearing a Martha's Vineyard shirt. And I hate Martha's Vineyard. But I didn't tell him this until, like, a month later on. And so he asked for my number, and that was kind of that, because when you're gay, there's a lot of hardship. And what you're really trying to find is a partner that will take all your faults in and accept you unconditionally. And if you're transgender, you want your partner to see you the way you want to be seen, versus how you think about yourself. or how you feel about yourself. So there's sort of this idealism, right? That we all want our partners to see in us. And I think when you're transgender, you really need the other person to really love you unconditionally and accept you for where you're at, and sort of hope that they see the same vision.
Really interesting distinction you made. As a transgender, you want your partner to see you in the way you want to be seen, but not necessarily the way you think of yourself. You truly think of yourself. That's an interesting distinction. Is it a type of affirmation then, your partner's perception?
I mean, all relationships are based on perception and expectation. But when you're heterosexual, you know, you already have all the rules. Men are handsome, women are beautiful, blah, 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 blah. But when you're gender non-binary or transgender, right, you and your partner have to sort of agree with the terms and conditions of how you want to be seen to each other.
I think I understand what you mean. I do. So how did that relationship play out? And what were the challenges you encountered? Or their challenges? Or both?
So he was a white Christian. I believe he was Christian. I don't really know. I'm Jewish. So everybody else is just like somewhere over there. And I know that's very naive of me, and I dated him for like a year and a half, so I should really know better, but I really don't. So he was a Christian, and so he really struggled with the idea of, you know, people are made in God's vision, right? That idea. Because what does that mean if you're transgender and if you don't believe in your own vision? So he really struggled with that. On top of that, he was white, and his parents were conservative, I'd say. And so he had struggled, like, you know, first telling his parents that he was gay, and then telling his parents that he's transgender. But eventually, I think they accepted him. I think it's hard. You sort of grieve the child you once had, I believe, as parents. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any kids, but I imagine that's what happens, right? You think your child's this way, you think your child's like, you know, this little girl, and then the little girl has died, and a little boy has taken its place. So you really need to learn your kid again. So. We were together for a year and a half, and it was quite a ride. We were both in art conservatories, and we broke up for a variety of different reasons. One of them, he wanted to spend Chinese New Year with like another woman, and I was like, well, you know, you do have a Chinese girlfriend, so why don't you spend it with me? And he's like, he wasn't really into it. And then when he realized the amount of trouble he got into for being so careless, because, you know, he's white, he doesn't understand. Sort of like the idea that Chinese New Year is the same as like Christmas, right? He was like, oh yeah, she was like a third Asian. And I was like, ooh, this really hurts. You cannot just sort of, you know, separate people's identities into their racial makeup, and also a third. What kind of math
Yeah,
is that?
yeah. What kind of math is that?
Exactly. So I had to yell at him for two things: one for being racist, and second for having poor maths.
Oh, God.
And then what happened is he wanted me to be more religious, and I just remember thinking, like, I'm just a Jewish girl, more culturally Jewish, socially Jewish than anything. And you've sort of known me for a year and a half, and you suddenly want me to be more religious? I don't really know about this. But he really wanted to get in touch with God himself. And I was like, well, why don't you first start going to church and let me know how that goes for you? But he couldn't do it. And so he started arguing with me about, like, wanting to go to church. And I was like, you know what? I sew every single day of my life. It is my profession. It's what I went to school for. So, you could say that my sewing is religion. And I sew every single day for about 8 hours. So if that is not the epitome of being religious, of believing in what you do, and believing in what yourself and creating things, right, sharing them, then I don't know why you're questioning me about my relationship to God. And so our relationship dissolved, and that was kind of that.
Wow. Well, it sounds like he was being neglectful there, for sure. And that math, that's the first thing that struck me when you said she's a third Chinese. I'm like, how does that work out? Half, a quarter, an eighth, even a 16th, I get. I think Brandon Lee was 3/8 Chinese, Bruce Lee's son. So, but that denominator doesn't fit very well. Jeez, I don't know. Maybe that's the Asian in us jumping to that, who knows. But, that's really insightful, Anni. Can you talk to another memorable relationship and something maybe very different?
Okay, so when I was a freshman in college, I started seeing this random girl from Tinder, as you do when you're a millennial. And she was a pretty horrible person.
Oh.
And
what was the attraction, Anni? What was the attraction both ways? What was it?
Well, I just liked that she lived in New York City, and I wanted to live in New York City. I do live in New York City, so, as you can see, I'm a very goal-oriented lady. And, I just wanted to sort of try on her lifestyle a little bit. She lived in New York City. I was a student, so I guess I was just visiting. And I met her family, and we'd have, like, dinner on Sundays, and her family really seemed to like me, but she really wanted me to be a particular way, right? She wanted me to not eat that much. She wanted me to not call her at night, but then call her every single night. Or she wanted me to explore a relationship deeper. And whatever she wanted was always on her terms and always on her conditions. And because she lived in New York and at the time I was in Massachusetts, we had a falling out. And I remember emailing her and I said, I don't want to see you for a very long time. And you know what? It's been a very long time since I've seen her, and I think I will not see her for a very long time. But this idea that people only want you in a particular way, right? Both with my transgender boyfriend and with this woman, right? They feel entitled to you. And when you're a gay person, you might not feel like you're even entitled to yourself. because there's so many different ways that you can reframe who you are in society, right? You are someone's daughter or son or person, right? You're someone's sibling. You're a student, maybe not. Maybe you're just an employee of some place.
Mm-hmm.
And they all want something from you. And to a certain extent, you have to deliver on their terms. But I think that when it comes to gay youth, especially, and even, being gay as adults, we really need to learn how to live our life for ourselves instead of trying to cut ourselves up into different shapes to fit other people's mouths.
And their different entitlements.
Yeah. I mean, the basic one is people feeling entitled to your body. Right. Yeah. Then people feeling entitled to your beliefs, or people feeling entitled to eat Chinese food with a 1/3 Asian. I just don't know where these ideas come from. But it's all about control. It's all about people trying to self-regulate via control of their partners.
That's an interesting insight. That really is. So you've had some diverse relationships and experiences and clearly learned a lot. So you've given us the gamut so far. This is great. The cultural, gendered, you're exploring your sexual fluidity at this point, right? So earlier when you were in high school, you told me you considered yourself gay. So when did that transition occur where you fit the designation of sexually fluid that you described to me at the beginning of the interview?
Well, I always identified myself as not heterosexual, which you could, say that I'm gay, which is true sometimes. Maybe I don't really know. It depends on your quantity of gay. I forgot the second.
Is it a third gay, or?
Yeah,
sorry,
a third.
I couldn't resist there. Yeah. So that was a gradual process. It's a dynamic process, right? So you might self-identify differently in 5 years' time?
Well, you identify differently depending on the space you're in all the time, right? If I go down south, I'm just not going to talk to anyone because of my racial makeup and my sexual preference. And when you're Asian, you can sort of slide right in.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
If you're an Asian woman, you can definitely just pretend to be something that you're not. I can definitely pretend to be heterosexual. They're incredibly boring. It's really easy. I can definitely pretend to be smarter than I am because I've got, model minority on my side. And
I don't know, Anni. You sound pretty damn smart.
That's very kind. But they're just different layers of identity,
like
and not everybody needs to know everything all at once about who you are. So I think it's like you present yourself in sort of like a need-to-know basis.
you don't need to answer, obviously, but what were some of the most painful, or a memory, a very painful memory that had to do with, a relationship of yours? I'm just going to shut this window here, so just think for a moment. Sorry, construction started outside the apartment there.
A couple of years ago, I spent the summer with my aunt, Edie, and she lived in Washington, D.C., and I was really excited because she has this in-ground pool. And she's always loved me best. She's not my real aunt. She's my mother's young adult friend. And she had cancer, brain cancer. And so I was really excited to spend the summer with her, with a pool, and just really get to know who she is. My mother had occasionally mentioned over the years that she had a relationship or relationships with women, and would just say it every now and then. And I just sort of, compartmentalize it. And, it wasn't, I had to really do some digging and research. And what I discovered was that my mother and my Aunt Edie, right, had a relationship together. So much so that they, had a little house together, and my mother had anticipated living and being with her for the rest of her life. And that
How did you feel when you made that revelation? That revelation became cognizant.
I was just why am I doing so much work? Why can't people just tell it to me straight? Why couldn't my mother just say, Anni, I loved Edie. We could have had a life together. And she couldn't. She had to give me little scraps here and there. And my Aunt Edie and I spent the summer with her, and she's someone who I knew all my life, also dropped me a scrap. So I'm uncovering this story from both sides, from whatever my mother tells me, from whatever my aunt tells me, and I'm really trying to put the pieces together. And one day all clicks together. It's oh my God, my mother was heartbroken over Edie leaving her for another woman. And then she goes to Washington, D.C. and, has other relationships and blah, 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 and never returns to my mother. And, I have a lot of empathy for my mother because I'm oh, that must be so devastating. Someone who you thought that you would spend your life with. And, since I'm adopted, I'm oh my God, they could have done the cliche, adopt a Asian person.
Oh, jeez.
As lesbians. And, I'm just thinking God, I am that daughter that my aunt and my mother never had. And here I am being sent off to my other mother for the summer, right?
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting how that worked out? Wow. So please continue the story.
And so because my Aunt Edie had, brain cancer, she, your frontal lobe, which controls your, controls you essentially.
Yeah.
She was losing that. So she was losing sort of control and censorship of what she was saying, as what happens when you get older in general. And so she started slipping up and saying crazy things, but they were all very true. She would say, Anni, you're my China girl. Or she would say, when's my daughter coming back? And Edie didn't have kids. So she really saw me as her kid. And it was really heartbreaking because she died she died 6 months later.
Oh, sorry.
And it felt here I am, I'm holding a love story secret, essentially. And I'm holding a potential life that my mother could have had with her lover from way back when. And my mother had the relationship with Edie in the 60s. And I'm just thinking, why wasn't my mother brave enough to be Edie, I love you. What the fuck are you doing? And I think that to be gay, you really have to be brave. You have to be brave about being honest about who you are ultimately and what you want, and not try to accommodate yourself to other people.
Wow. What are some really positive moments? I mean, you talked about one with your teachers, almost mentoring you, and that seemed very positive. What about later? Do you have any overtly positive memories that you'd like to share with our audience?
I mean, I don't know what to say, because being gay is really hard. It's really hard. The things I really remember about that really sort of elate me is knowing that there is a capacity to love that is always expansive. And it's not limited to gender or religion or race. And I think holding on to this idea that you can love anyone, I think that makes you have a lot of capacity and empathy for lots of different kinds of people. You don't have to love everyone, but there has to be a redeeming quality about everyone. Because as a gay person, you're so prosecuted and so misunderstood before you even are able to articulate yourself. And so having the generosity for other people, I think that makes you okay. Because ultimately how we want to be treated is how we treat others. And it's how we treat ourselves.
You mentioned a liberal upbringing and some supportive teachers, supportive parents, a supportive mother who went through a long-term, unfortunate, and a purgatory in a sense. What would you like to see in the rest of the world? Anni's world seems like you had some fortune, but there's also been, like you said, hardship, serious hardship, and you use the word prosecution. So persecution and prosecution. What would you like to see in the rest of the world regarding individuals with beyond the gender norms?
I wish that people could be as generous to themselves as they are for other people. Because I think the people that we really are critical of, the people that we hate the most, are the qualities that we see inside ourselves.
So a projection of our own weaknesses onto others and hating that because we don't like it in ourselves.
Yeah.
So you want people to feel forgiving of the person where it probably matters the most, themselves.
Yeah, I want people to feel liberated from their own shame and issues and understand that they can put their histories behind them and but they don't have to take it out on other people, and they don't have to take it out on themselves.
And that would promote then fellowship and understanding and tolerance with others once you are at peace with who you are.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I think that's more than fair.
And I think it'll allow people to live more honestly. Because the big takeaway I can think of with my mother and my Aunt Edie is that had my mother lived more honestly, she would have really been happier. And so would have my Aunt Edie. So I think that it's not that we're chasing happiness. It's more that we're chasing a truth that is not socially constructed by other people.
To say today on this video podcast?
You know, I'm okay, but is there something that you want to ask?
Not particularly anymore. I think you've expanded the realm of possibility with your statements and your experience. I really, is there something I should ask? What would you like me to ask?
Sam,
Yes.
so did Anni, I didn't catch 100%, did Anni mention what advice she would...
I would like to know that, and I do have that question, but I would like to know, and I think we've touched on this already, what advice then would you give that little girl, or that, and I alluded to this earlier in the interview, that little Anni, perhaps, encountering her or him or them now?
Yeah, and also, Sam, people in today's environment who are cisgender, what advice that she would provide those people who are seeking positive relationships and experiences and stuff like that.
So my producer is wanting to be more specific about advice that she would have for other cisgendered but sexually fluid individuals. And I think we did mention that earlier, but I'd like you to expound on that if you can, now that you have a platform here, Anni.
I think it's very important that we see... I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. So with the idea of you're made in God's image, right? That whole idea is like there is a quality inside of you that is godlike. So I'm not Christian, so I don't really know that. I mean, I read a couple chapters of the Bible. It was very interesting. If you're a cisgendered person, or if you're just a person in general, you have to find a godly quality in them, because everybody has it. So in order to come to a deep understanding of humanity and how we're able to relate to others, categorizing people as other is not helpful to building bridges and having conversations and having relationships that we didn't think that we could have. So trying to find a redeeming quality or a kindness or something in which you can really understand, that will create tolerance and maybe friendship.
So seek the divinity in everyone.
Yeah.
To foster understanding in relationships.
Yeah.
At the very least, tolerance.
Yeah, and I think tolerance is like really generous, because it's like, you know what, I see that I really don't like you, but I'm going to I know why I don't like you, and I'm just going to put that aside so we can collaborate on whatever. I work in the arts, right? I work in theater, so my entire my entire workforce is based on this idea of really tolerating egocentric personalities in order to create art. And I think that you can sort of put that the same in your relationships with your parents, your siblings, your coworkers, what have you. And accept that people have faults and that it's not for you to change them, but for you to reframe your ideas about them and come to an understanding. That's where they're at, and this is where you are, and that you can collaborate, and something genuine can come from it.
Anni, I have this urge to want to check in with you, like in a year or 2 or 5 and 10 and 20, and see, the evolution of your ideas and self-perception and insights. Any explicit complications being of Asian descent, Chinese descent, combined with your sexual orientation, the concept of the model minority, and being adopted and not feeling like you actually fit that mold. And I understand that. And I've gone through something similar where in some respects I fit the mold, but I don't necessarily look Asian, especially to other Asians. I'm never taken as Asian. But to whites and blacks, oh, I'm Asian all right, And yet, I've got a PhD in math, I've got a medical degree, I played piano, I did martial arts, I was a martial artist. Like, I was the good Chinese boy without meaning to be the good Chinese boy, because my mother never put any pressure on my brother and I ever, at least academically. That never happened. It was, oh, your mom must have been so, intense on it. No, my mom wouldn't even open my report card. She just looked at me and said, did you do your best? And I'm like, yeah, I think I did. Good, we'll just leave it here for your father to look at later. And I was like, okay. And that was it.
So she instilled autonomy into you.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think that's a very good parenting technique.
I think so. My mother is the strongest and greatest woman I know. She's my hero. And when I think back to things that she did, I'm only now realizing and appreciating, and I want to instill that in children someday. I don't have children yet, but someday I want to do that, because there are things there that I'm only now appreciating. And so I have the outlet. And my father contributed in other ways, My father was the creativity and the innovator and the childlike curiosity, but my mother was the pragmatism and the street sense and the wisdom and the strength of character and the motivation without pushing that. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to get personal there, but I feel a kinship with you for a reason, anything else you'd like to add there, Anni, about being of Chinese descent, being adopted by a Jewish family, liberal Jewish family? I mean, this is a very interesting, fascinating background, and yet it's so moving, too, the way you talk about it, and so insightful. With a mother who had this relationship with a woman that she self-denied, and yet projected that onto you. And then the idea of having these two mothers seeing you as their daughter and what could have been, and how that nevertheless manifested in your life, and you found yourself there. I really am the little Asian adopted girl of these two women, gender fluid or gay or bisexual women. And forgive me if there's another designation for them or self-perception for them, but you know, it's you've thought a lot about this, you know, and I don't care what your ethnic background, your educational background, you're clearly very well spoken and highly intelligent, if I may be so bold to say. And I think you sell yourself pretty short, and that maybe you do fit that model minority stereotype more than you think, just not in the way that you originally perceived. And I'd love to see some of your artwork someday, you know. And sewing 8 hours a day, I'm intrigued by what you created, and the analogy with religion and your passion for sewing. It's really, it was really very, very striking. I know. This is awesome. Oh.
Move over.
Move over.
Hey, move over.
Move over.
Dad, move over.
Slow down and move over. Lives depend on it.